Okay, last time you and I spoke, we were talking about real teaching, which of course was the relevance, engagement, assessment, and language that kind of flows through all of the Good Vibes teaching. What is the thing that you think underpins that?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question because a teacher has got to be able to be teaching something, and we're quite different in the respect that we're not teaching necessarily a piece of music, but instead we're teaching a skill so that a student can then go off and play lots of other different pieces of music.
So skills-based teaching, how would you define what a skill is then?
Ooh. Yeah, so a skill from our own point of view is either a technique or a musical concept that a student is able to transfer between different pieces of music. So if you like, you could see it that we're kind of teaching how to sight read to a really, really good standard. Because what we want to do is to teach a student how to do a particular technique, really understand it, get to the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of that particular technique or making music, and then make sure that they can then apply that to any other piece of music that they ever see again.
So let's try and marry that up now with the skills-based teaching with the real teaching. So how does that help with making the music relevant to the student?
Yeah, good. So with skills-based learning, we're interested obviously in the skill, which means that for us, we can deliver that skill through any piece of music, as long as it's got the ability to carry that. And you'll sometimes hear us talking about using music as a vehicle. And that's exactly what we're talking about there, is it becomes a vehicle for delivering that skill. When you have that kind of approach to it, it means that it's not constrained by a piece of music. It doesn't mean that we have to teach piece X or piece Y. It means that actually instead we could take something that is much more relevant to the student and use that piece of music to teach the skill.
So a real world example, I guess, of that could be something like the skill you're trying to teach is power chords on the guitar. And then I guess using the students' interests and their musical preferences, you would then marry up a piece of music that they would enjoy.
Exactly right, exactly that. So that's a really great example with the power chords there, because it's quite a big contextual kind of area, which means that, I mean, it's a technique that is used across lots and lots of different pieces of music, different genres, and in fact you could use that particular technique to play pretty much any piece of music. So therefore, if you've got that as a basis, you could use that to be playing rock music, you use it for some pop music, it could be some Bryan Adams, it could be some Oasis. The world suddenly opens up to you, which means that you can really tailor that lesson to the student. And that's got the added benefit then that if the piece of music is really relevant to that student, then it means that the chances are they're going to want to play that more outside their lesson. And that then feeds into our other concept, which is based around fun and progress. That if they're enjoying what they're doing, they're going to be making more progress. They're making more progress, they're going to enjoy what they're doing, and so the spiral continues.
Absolutely. So I can see how that would work really well from the student's point of view. How would that kind of show up in teacher prep for lessons? Because that must be quite a different way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, it takes a lot of work and a lot of thought about it. But that's our jobs, if you like, is that my job is not to teach them how to play a piece of music, but how to play an instrument. And so therefore I need to give them the skills to do that, and I want to make it in a way that is really accessible and really relevant to each individual student. And as you know, Ben, from your own years of teaching, is that every student is different, and everybody's got different tastes and what interests them. The little kind of extension for that is that I'd say that we've also got a responsibility, not just to do and allow students to play pieces that they want to play, but we also need to broaden horizons as well. And so whilst Nirvana might be particularly relevant to a student, there's also a whole much bigger world of music out there that we've got responsibility of sharing with them in opening eyes, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having done some of this in my own teaching for a little while, I find that it allows you quite a lot of freedom in a way. You're kind of free to teach any music when you start thinking about the skills as the thing that you're trying to convey to that student.
And from your own point of view, what's the impact of that been for the students?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think one is what you already mentioned and kind of touched on, which is that if I'm teaching a student music that they are interested in and that they enjoy, they're playing music outside of the lessons is going to go up. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just absolutely going to be the case. But the other side of it, I guess, is that it retrains the way that I think as a teacher, because I'm no longer looking at pieces of music and trying to find, oh, what level is this piece of music? Can I find a piece of music? You know, you end up creating much more of your own resources, which I think helps your teaching, because when you've gone through the process of going, okay, this is the skill I want to teach, for this particular student, these are the areas of music where I'm going to use to teach it. Let's say they're really into rock music. Okay, great. There's, 50 years worth of material that I could pull from. And because I've thought about it and I've made sure that it's the right level for that student, it becomes tailor-made to the student firstly, but also I think from my point of view, I am much better able to teach it than I would be had I just opened a grade 5 book.
And that's a really key point actually, is because you're much more comfortable with your teaching at that point, because actually you know that resource inside out. It also means that you've got some resources in your back pocket for future students, so it's not wasted work, as it were, is that you can use that over and over again as well.
Well, and it's a process, isn't it? I think you get fast at going through the process, so the first few times it might feel like extra work, but it becomes very quick. You can kind of go, yep, great, let's take the power chord example. You can play 99% of pop songs using power chords. Then it's a case of finding, A, what is the kind of music that's going to get this student to play more, and B, what do I think is good for them developmentally to do next?
Exactly. And with skills-based learning, what you're always thinking about, what comes next? How do the skills link together? If I start with this particular skill, what one comes next? And that also might vary for the student as well, because some students you can just kind of sense and it's not quite right. Okay, oh, that's not the right direction for them right now. We'll go over here and come back to that one later on as well.
And have you ever had any situations where you've done this kind of skills-based teaching and then found that the students get kind of eureka moments later down the line?
Well, I actually think that it's such a critical part of learning now, how to be teaching, because you're instilling really good technique and ability, if you like, from the 5 pillars. You're really instilling that much earlier, which means that it allows students to keep progressing, because you're building that solid foundation, which means once they get to grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, actually, because they've got the skills, they're able to keep progressing much faster.
Yeah, what I've found is sometimes you'll start a new piece of music with a student and then they will tweak, oh, that's like the one we did before, because they can already do the skill, and you go, exactly, that's exactly it.
Exactly. And the other side of it as well, the bit that I personally absolutely love, is when a student goes away and finds a piece of music, they come back and say, oh, look what I've been working on. Yeah. And it's like, oh, my job's done.
Yeah, or even writes a piece of music.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that for me, like, there couldn't be a greater sense of achievement at that point, because actually that student there is putting into practice being a musician, which is about being creative, about going off, exploring their own music and what inspires them.